There is a documentary that cost $40 million to make. $40 million. And somewhere in the editing room, a decision was made that sent shockwaves through one of the most powerful families on Earth. Ivanka Trump was cut out. Not sidelined, not given less screen time, cut. Completely. Erased from a film about a family she has been part of for decades. And the woman who made that call wasn't a producer, wasn't a studio executive, wasn't some Hollywood gatekeeper with a vendetta. It was Melania.
Hi fans, it's Melania Trump.
And if you think you understand why, I promise you, you don't. Not yet. Let's go back, because to understand what this documentary represents, you have to understand what Melania Trump has been carrying for the last 20 years. Quietly, silently, with that expression on her face that the whole world has spent years trying to decode. She arrived in America in 1996, a Slovenian model from a small town called Sevnica. Population? Nobody. A place so obscure that when her husband became president of the United States, the entire town became a tourist destination overnight. They sold Melania-themed honey, Melania-themed wine. A local baker made a Melania cake. The world suddenly needed to know everything about this woman. But Melania had spent years making sure the world knew almost nothing. That was intentional. That was a choice. And it tells you everything about who she is. She met Donald Trump in 1998 at a party in New York. She was 28, he was 52. He was with another date that night, and he still asked for Melania's number. And here is the detail that most people skip over because it seems small, but it is actually everything. She asked for his number too.
Hi, Mr. President.
A woman in a room full of people competing for Donald Trump's attention, and she was the one who made him wait. That tells you who Melania Trump actually is underneath the silence. She is not passive. She is not a prop. She is a woman who has always known exactly what she was doing and has spent 20 years letting the world underestimate her, because underestimation is its own kind of power. But here is where this story gets complicated. Because while Melania was quietly building her position, brick by brick, on her own terms, there was another woman in Donald Trump's world who was doing the exact same thing. Loudly, publicly, with a brand and a platform and a seat at every table. Ivanka. Ivanka Trump is Donald Trump's daughter from his first marriage to Ivana Trump. She was born in 1981. By the time Melania entered the picture, Ivanka was already a teenager, already being groomed, in the most literal sense of the word, to be her father's legacy, his reflection, his favorite. Donald Trump has said things about Ivanka publicly that made people deeply uncomfortable. He said if she weren't his daughter, he'd be dating her. He said she has the best body. He has commented on her figure on national television. And Ivanka, instead of creating distance from those comments, smiled, laughed, played along. Because Ivanka understood something very early. The closer she stayed to her father, the more power she had. And she was not going to let anyone get between her and that proximity. Enter Melania. From the very beginning, the dynamic between these two women was complicated in ways that the public only ever got glimpses of. Melania was a new wife. Ivanka was the daughter who had always been the woman of the house in every room her father occupied. And when Melania stepped in, quietly, without making a scene, the balance shifted. But Ivanka didn't move. Ivanka never moves. She just absorbs and repositions. When Donald became president, Ivanka and her husband Jared Kushner moved to Washington. They took offices in the West Wing. They had security clearances. They had portfolios. They had access. Melania stayed in New York for months. Officially, it was for Barron, to let him finish the school year, to give him stability. And that is true. But it is not the whole truth. The whole truth is that Melania Trump walked into the White House and found that her husband's daughter had already furnished it. People who worked in the Trump White House during that period describe a tension that was never spoken about directly, but was felt in every room. Ivanka operated like a co-first lady. She attended state dinners, she sat in on meetings with world leaders, she represented the administration at international forums. She filled spaces that in any other presidency would have been filled by the actual first lady. And Melania, instead of confronting it, watched, calculated, waited. Because here is what most people still don't understand about Melania Trump. She plays a very long game. While everyone was focused on Ivanka's Instagram posts from G7 summits and her clothing line and her book about women who work, Melania was watching, filing things away, building something that nobody could see yet because it wasn't ready yet. The documentary is what was ready. $40 million, Netflix, full creative control, final cut approval. Those are the terms Melania reportedly negotiated for her documentary. And that last one, final cut approval, is the one that matters. Because final cut approval means nobody gets in without her permission and nobody gets left in if she decides they need to go. The documentary is directed by Brett Ratner, a name that carries its own complicated history, which we will come back to. It covers Melania's life from Sevnica to the White House and beyond, her childhood, her modeling career, her marriage, her time as First Lady, and according to multiple sources, Ivanka filmed content for it. She sat down, she gave her account, she put herself on camera talking about her stepmother, about the family, about the White House years.
And Melania cut every frame of it. Every single frame. Now, the official explanation is that the documentary is focused on Melania's story and Ivanka's segments didn't fit the narrative. And that explanation is technically true. It is also, and I say this with complete confidence, not the whole story. Because you don't cut someone completely. You don't remove every trace of a person who was genuinely central to a chapter of your life unless you are making a statement. Unless the cut itself is the message. Melania didn't just edit a documentary. She rewrote history, on her terms, with her name on it. And Ivanka, for possibly the first time in her life, had no move to make. In 2018, the world learned that Donald Trump had allegedly paid hush money to adult film actress Stormy Daniels to cover up an alleged affair that reportedly took place in 2006. Melania had given birth to Barron just 4 months before the alleged encounter. 4 months. And Melania's response to that revelation, when it finally became public, was not rage, was not tears on camera, was not a statement through a publicist full of carefully worded denial. Her response was to cancel a trip to Davos with Donald. Quietly. Without explanation. And then to show up weeks later at the State of the Union in white. Head to toe white. The color of suffragettes. The color of resistance. The color of women who have decided they are done being silent. She didn't say a word. She didn't have to. That is Melania's language. Silence and symbols. Chosen carefully, deployed precisely. And Ivanka, who was present at that State of the Union, who sat in that room and watched her stepmother walk in wearing white, understood exactly what was being communicated. Because Ivanka speaks that language too. 2 women, same room, same man between them, and a message sent in fabric that no camera could ignore and no reporter could quite pin down. That moment planted a seed, and the documentary is where it finally bloomed. Let's talk about what was actually happening between these 2 women during the White House years, because the public version, the version of coordinated outfits at state events and polished family photos, is almost entirely fiction. People close to both women describe a relationship defined by 2 things: mutual respect for each other's intelligence and complete, absolute distrust. Ivanka believed, and there is significant evidence to support this, that Melania was not equipped to handle the demands of being First Lady, that she was uncomfortable with the public role, that she needed guidance. And Ivanka, who had grown up in the spotlight, who had been performing for cameras since she was a teenager, quietly positioned herself as the one who could provide that guidance. Melania did not want guidance. Melania has never wanted guidance. Melania has wanted to be left alone to do things her way on her timeline. The Be Best campaign, Melania's signature initiative as First Lady, focused on children's well-being and online safety, was developed almost entirely without input from Ivanka's team. That was deliberate. Melania wanted something that was hers, something that couldn't be absorbed or redirected or rebranded. And when the campaign launched, Ivanka was notably absent from the front row. These are small things, protocol things. Things that look like scheduling conflicts from the outside. But inside that building, inside that family, they were understood as exactly what they were. Lines being drawn. For most of Donald Trump's adult life, that planet was Ivanka. She was his favorite. Publicly, privately, and unapologetically. She sat at his right hand. She finished his sentences. He translated him to the world in a way that made him more palatable, more presidential, more human. And then something shifted. Sources who spent time at Mar-a-Lago after the 2020 election describe a change in the atmosphere around Ivanka and Jared. A cooling. A distance that hadn't been there before. Partly political. Jared's influence had waned. His Middle East peace deals praised but ultimately incomplete. His pandemic supply chain role quietly forgotten. Partly personal. Ivanka had begun building her own life in Miami, separate from the political machinery her father was preparing to rebuild. She was stepping back. And in Donald Trump's world, stepping back is indistinguishable from stepping away. Melania, meanwhile, was stepping forward. Quietly, in her own way, but forward. The documentary is the proof. Now here's the twist. Here's the part of the story that reframes everything you just heard. For all the tension, for all the quiet war being fought in the corridors of the most powerful building on Earth, there was one thing Melania Trump and Ivanka Trump have in common that neither of them has ever said out loud. They were both performing. Ivanka performed competence and warmth and relatability for a public that she needed on her side. Melania performed serenity and elegance and mystery for a public she wanted to keep at a distance. Two women, two completely different strategies, both designed to survive the same man. Because here's the thing about Donald Trump that both of these women understand better than anyone else on Earth. He does not share the spotlight. Not really. He can appear to. He can be generous with credit when it costs him nothing. But when it matters, when the cameras are really on, Donald Trump is the center of every story he is in. And every woman in his life has had to figure out how to exist in relationship to that gravity. Ivanka's solution was to orbit as close as possible. To make herself so useful, so present, so necessary that she couldn't be excluded. Melania's solution was to orbit from a distance. To be so self-contained, so controlled, so impossible to fully read that she couldn't be defined by anyone other than herself. The documentary is Melania finally stepping into the center. Telling her story in her voice, on her terms. Not as Donald's wife, not as Barron's mother, not as the woman standing next to the most controversial political figure of the modern era, as herself. And Ivanka doesn't get to be in that story, because Ivanka's presence in that story would make it, even slightly, about Donald, about the family, about the dynasty. And Melania is done being part of someone else's story. There is one more layer to this, one more detail that most coverage has missed entirely. The director, Brett Ratner. Brett Ratner was one of the most powerful directors in Hollywood before 2017. And then, during the Me Too movement, multiple women came forward with allegations against him. He denied the allegations. Hollywood effectively blacklisted him. Melania Trump hired him anyway. Think about what that says. Think about the statement that makes, intentional or not. A woman who has spent years being discussed, analyzed, and judged by people who have never spent 5 minutes in her actual life, hiring a director that the cultural establishment decided was untouchable. Was that a political statement? A loyalty play for her husband's base? A genuine belief in second chances? Or was it simply Melania doing what Melania always does? Making a choice that serves her purposes and letting everyone else argue about what it means. I don't have a clean answer to that. And I think that ambiguity is the most honest thing I can offer you. The documentary doesn't have a release date yet. The $40 million is spent, the footage exists, and somewhere in that footage, on a hard drive in an editing suite, are the frames of Ivanka Trump that will never see the light of day. Ivanka has not commented publicly on being cut. Of course she hasn't, because commenting would be losing, and Ivanka Trump does not lose publicly if she can help it. But here is the haunting question that I can't stop thinking about, the one that doesn't have an answer yet. When this documentary finally releases, when the world sees Melania's version of those White House years, her version of that marriage, her version of what it cost her to stand in those rooms and smile for those cameras, will Donald watch it? And if he does, which version of events will he recognize? Because I think, and this is just me thinking out loud, I think Melania has made a film that tells the truth. Not all of it, but enough of it. Carefully selected truth, arranged in a specific order, with specific absences that speak as loudly as anything that made the final cut. She spent 20 years being the most visible, invisible woman in the world. The documentary is her becoming visible, fully, finally, on her own terms. Ivanka didn't make the cut. Maybe that was always the whole point. If this story made you see Melania and the women around her completely differently, check out the video on your screen right now. I genuinely think it was made for you.